Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I never thought free electricity could spark a neighborhood war, but here we are. What started as a simple solar panel installation turned into a battle of wills against the most entitled HOA president alive. Karen, fines, threats, sabotage. She tried it all, but she forgot one thing. I don't lose. I'd always dreamed of owning a home that would allow me to be completely independent. No reliance on overpriced electricity, no unnecessary utility bills, just me and a self-sustaining system. After years of working as an engineer specializing in environmental technology, I finally made that dream a reality. I purchased a beautiful, spacious house on the outskirts of Oak Ridge Estates, a so-called prestigious gated community in California. But here's the catch. My property wasn't actually in the community. It was located right next to it, on a private lot that had never been incorporated into their homeowners association. That, in my mind, was a blessing. The house was everything I had wanted. A large, open backyard, a quiet street, and most importantly, a roof positioned perfectly for solar panels. I had them installed just weeks after moving in, setting up a state-of-the-art energy system that made my home nearly 100% self-sufficient. No more skyrocketing electric bills, no more dependence on the grid. I was producing my own clean energy, and that felt like a major win. For a while, everything was great. The sun powered my house. I worked remotely from my office with an incredible view, and life was peaceful. But like all good things, the peace didn't last. It started with the looks. At first, it was just a few passing glances from the well-manicured Stepford wife types who lived in Oak Ridge Estates. I'd see them walking their little dogs, pausing in front of my property, whispering amongst themselves as their eyes darted up to my solar panels. Then came the more aggressive staring sessions, cars slowing down near my driveway, drivers craning their necks to get a better view. It felt ridiculous. What was so controversial about free energy? Then, one morning, I met her. I was outside adjusting one of the panel inverters when a woman with a meticulously styled blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard marched onto my driveway like she owned the place. She had that stiff, authoritative posture that instantly told me she was the kind of person who believed the world operated by her rules. "Good morning," she announced, her voice carrying the tone of someone about to issue a citation. "You must be the new homeowner." I wiped my hands on my jeans and nodded, not particularly interested in entertaining whatever this was. "Yep, that's me. Can I help you?" She gave a tight-lipped smile that looked more like a grimace. "I'm Karen Johnson, the president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA." She paused, as if expecting that title to hold the same weight as a badge of law enforcement. I blinked at her. "Okay?" Karen's forced smile faltered. She gestured vaguely at my roof with her clipboard. "I wanted to discuss your solar panels. We have very clear guidelines about the aesthetic integrity of our community, and unfortunately, these panels violate those guidelines. You'll need to have them removed." I let out a short laugh before realizing she was serious. Yeah, no, I'm not a part of your HOA." Karen's expression didn't change, but I could tell she was thrown off. "Excuse me. I don't live in Oak Ridge Estates. My property is private and not under HOA jurisdiction," I said, crossing my arms. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly and she clutched her clipboard a little tighter. "This neighborhood has standards and all homes are expected to comply with community regulations." I shrugged. "That's nice. But again, I'm not in your community. You don't get to dictate what I do with my property." She opened her mouth as if to argue, but then closed it, clearly reassessing the situation. After a moment, she plastered another artificially polite smile on her face. "Well, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll make sure you get a copy of our HOA handbook. You'll see that we're very strict about maintaining a cohesive look throughout the neighborhood." I sighed, already knowing where this was going. "Save your ink. I don't need it. Your HOA has zero authority over my property, and I have every legal right to keep my solar panels." Karen stared at me for a moment as if her brain was struggling to process the concept of someone not being under her control. Then she huffed, flipping through her clipboard before pulling out a printed document. "Here," she said, thrusting it at me. "You're in violation of multiple aesthetic and infrastructure codes outlined in this." I didn't even take the paper. "Ma'am, you can keep that. I don't care what your bylaws say. I don't pay HOA fees, I don't follow HOA rules, and I don't recognize your authority over my house. If you have a real complaint, feel free to talk to my lawyer." That did it. Her eyes flared with rage, and she sucked in a breath, probably to deliver some long-winded retort, but instead, she simply clenched her jaw, gave me a sharp nod, and stormed off. As she disappeared down the street, I figured that was the end of it. I had no idea what I had just started. A few days after my first encounter with Karen, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had gotten the message. Maybe she had gone home, poured herself a glass of overpriced Chardonnay, and moved on with her life. I was wrong. It started with a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just a single sheet of paper with bold red lettering at the top. Notice of violation. I sighed, already knowing what this was. Unfolding the letter, I read the words that felt like they had been written by a bureaucratic demon on a power trip. Dear homeowner, you are in violation of Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association regulations. Your solar panels do not conform to community aesthetic standards and must be removed immediately. Failure to comply will result in fines and further disciplinary action. At the bottom, Karen's signature was scrawled with annoying self-importance. I chuckled. Nice try, Karen. I grabbed a pen, flipped the paper over, and scribbled my response. Dear Karen, I do not belong to your HOA. This letter is about as legally binding as a child's crayon drawing of a stop sign. Kindly stop wasting paper. Sincerely, the guy who enjoys free electricity. I folded it neatly and shoved it into her HOA's little suggestion box near the entrance of Oak Ridge Estates. I thought that would be the end of it. Again, I was wrong. The next day, another letter showed up, this one more aggressive. Second notice, fines applied. You have been fined $500 for non-compliance. Additional fines will accrue if corrective actions are not taken immediately. They had even printed out an invoice as if I was some kind of delinquent customer. I burst out laughing. They really thought they could fine me. Just for fun, I called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. It rang 3 times before Karen picked up. This is Karen Johnson, HOA president. Hey Karen, it's your favorite off-the-grid neighbor. Listen, I got your little letter about the fine, and I just wanted to clarify something. Are you delusional, or do you just enjoy wasting ink? Silence. Then a stiff, irritated breath. This is a serious matter. We have authority over all properties in this neighborhood. I stretched my legs onto my coffee table, grinning. That's adorable, but see, here's the thing. I'm not in your HOA. Your pretend fines don't apply to me. So, good luck with that. Karen's voice dropped into threatening territory. If you refuse to comply, we will escalate the matter accordingly. Oh, please do, I said. In fact, let me make it easy for you. I'll frame your letter and hang it next to my electricity bill. Oh, wait, I don't have one. Click. I had won that round, but I knew this wasn't over. The following week, Karen changed tactics. Suddenly, I had an endless stream of inspectors and city officials knocking on my door. First, it was code enforcement. We received a complaint about unauthorized modifications to your property. I led the guy into my backyard, showed him the permits for my solar panels, and watched his face morph into pure regret for even showing up. Then, it was environmental services. Sir, we got a report that your solar panels are causing hazardous glare that could be blinding drivers. I gestured toward the road. Yeah? Where? The highway is half a mile away. The inspector, clearly embarrassed, checked his clipboard, mumbled something, and left. Karen wasn't done. A fire marshal showed up, saying he got a tip that my panels were a fire hazard. I laughed. Buddy, I'm an engineer. These things are safer than the hairspray fumes coming out of Karen's house. One by one they came, and one by one they left empty-handed. Then Karen pulled her most ridiculous stunt yet. One morning, I was sipping my coffee when I heard the blaring sound of a tow truck outside. I walked out and saw a guy getting ready to hook my car up to the truck. What the hell are you doing? I called. The guy scratched his head, looking confused. I got a call from the HOA saying this car was illegally parked. I nearly doubled over laughing. This is my driveway. The tow truck driver, now realizing the level of stupidity he had been roped into, sighed and left without another word. At this point, it was beyond hilarious. Karen was throwing everything she had at me, and I was slapping down her attempts like a game of whack-a-mole. But I knew something was coming. Karen wasn't the type to just give up. She was about to take things to a whole new level of crazy. It was only a matter of time before Karen escalated from petty bureaucracy to something far worse. After the failed fines, fake complaints, and the hilarious tow truck incident, I figured she was running out of moves. But I underestimated her commitment to insanity. One night, just after midnight, I was half asleep when I heard a strange noise outside. It wasn't loud, just a faint scraping sound, like metal against metal, followed by a soft thud. I sat up, immediately on alert. My house was equipped with motion-activated floodlights, but for some reason, they hadn't gone off. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera feed. Nothing. The camera overlooking my backyard wasn't showing anything unusual. The panels were still there. The yard was empty. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I checked the front camera. Still nothing. Satisfied that it was probably just a stray raccoon, I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. The next morning, I walked outside to check on my solar panels just in case, and that's when I saw it. Carnage. My panels had been damaged. Badly. One had a giant crack across its surface, another had completely detached from its mount, and a few of the wiring connections had been ripped out, leaving exposed cables dangling like severed nerves. I felt my blood pressure spike. Somebody had done this. I rushed inside and checked the security footage again, convinced I must have missed something. But no, my backyard camera had a blind spot right near where the panels were mounted. Whoever did this had known exactly where to go. That's when I got an idea. I walked over to my neighbor's house, a friendly older guy named Frank, who had mentioned he'd recently upgraded his security system. If anyone had seen something, it was him. Frank was more than happy to help. We pulled up his camera footage, rewinding to the previous night, and that's when we saw her. Karen. At first, it wasn't even clear what she was doing. She had dragged a metal ladder from somewhere and was trying to climb onto my patio cover, which led directly to my solar panels. The problem? Karen, despite all her arrogance, was not an athlete. As she put one foot on the ladder and tried to haul herself up, the entire thing wobbled dangerously. She hesitated, then tried again. And that's when the real comedy began. The ladder slipped out from under her, sending Karen sprawling onto the grass like a sack of cement. Frank and I burst into laughter, but Karen, determined as ever, wasn't giving up. She dragged herself up, adjusted the ladder, and climbed again, this time making it onto the patio roof. We watched as she crept toward the solar panels, wielding what looked like a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. The moment she started tampering with the wiring, something hilarious happened. Sparks. A tiny burst of electricity zapped her hand, making her yelp and nearly fall off the roof a second time. At this point, Frank was crying with laughter, but Karen wasn't done. She yanked on the cables again, this time ripping them completely out, before slipping and scrambling back down like a deranged raccoon, making a getaway. We watched in fascination as she limped off into the night, leaving behind a mess of broken panels, loose wiring, and a trail of utter failure. I turned to Frank, who wiped tears from his eyes. "Well," he said, "that's got to be the dumbest criminal I've ever seen." I nodded, still processing what I had just witnessed. Karen had just incriminated herself on video. Now it was my turn. Time to fight back. The next morning, as I stood in my backyard surveying the wreckage Karen had left behind, my blood simmered. The cracked solar panel, the torn-out wiring, the sheer audacity of her stunt. It was one thing to play her little HOA power games, but outright trespassing and vandalism, that was a whole new level of insanity. And I wasn't just going to sit back and take it. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency police number. I could have gone straight to 911, but honestly, I wanted to enjoy this. "Yeah, hi," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I need to report an act of vandalism and trespassing on my property. I also have video evidence of the suspect in action." That got their attention. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car pulled up in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out. One of them, an older guy, who had the energy of a man who had seen way too much stupidity in his career. The other, a younger cop, who looked annoyingly eager. "Morning," the senior officer greeted, pulling out his notepad. "You said you had video evidence of the vandal." I grinned and motioned toward Frank's house. "Even better, multiple camera angles." We walked over, and Frank, who was more than happy to assist in taking Karen down, pulled up the footage. And just like before, we all watched Karen's epic failures unfold on screen. The slipping ladder, the hard fall, the electrified shock, and the pathetic getaway. The older cop snorted, shaking his head. Jesus Christ, she tried to scale your roof twice? The younger cop was losing it. I can't, He pointed at the screen as Karen took the electric zap to the hand. She really thought she could just yank out solar wiring like that. Apparently, I deadpanned. The older officer sighed. All right, you want to press charges? Oh, absolutely. Good call. He scribbled something down, then turned to the younger cop. We're going to go pay Karen a little visit. That's when the real fun started. As I waited for the cops to handle Karen, I decided to ramp up my own counterattack. First, I called my lawyer, a guy named David, who loved dealing with HOA overreach cases. The second I told him what had happened, he practically cackled with glee. Oh, this is going to be fun. Next, I drafted a formal legal complaint against the HOA. Even though Karen had acted alone, she had been using HOA authority as a weapon against me for weeks. That meant their organization could be held liable for harassment, fraudulent fines, and now criminal trespassing. Then I made some phone calls, one to my local news station, because what's better than taking down a corrupt HOA president? Doing it publicly. By the time the cops arrived at Karen's house, half the neighborhood had already noticed. A small crowd of residents gathered, watching as the officers knocked on her door. At first, she refused to answer. Then, after what felt like forever, she finally stepped outside, arms crossed, trying to look indignant and powerful. What is the meaning of this? She snapped. The older cop did not have time for her nonsense. Ma'am, we have video evidence of you trespassing onto private property, vandalizing solar panels, and attempting to tamper with electrical wiring. You're under arrest for criminal trespass and property damage. Karen's entire face turned red. This is ridiculous. That man, he's ruining the neighborhood. He doesn't even follow community standards. Ma'am, the officer said, bored. You literally broke into his backyard and damaged his property. We watched you do it twice. Now turn around. Karen sputtered. And then the handcuffs clicked. The moment Karen was escorted to the police car, someone in the crowd clapped. Then another, and another. Within seconds, half the neighborhood was cheering. I stood near my fence, arms crossed, as Karen was shoved into the back of the police cruiser, screaming about how she was going to sue everybody. I caught the older cop's eye. He looked back at me, nodding in satisfaction. You're welcome. I grinned. Oh, don't worry, I'm not done yet. With Karen hauled off in handcuffs and the neighborhood buzzing with excitement, I knew the battle was won. But the war wasn't over yet. Sure, she was facing criminal charges, but what about the HOA itself? They had enabled her harassment, backed her ridiculous fines, and now they were scrambling to distance themselves from the mess. I wasn't going to let them off that easy. The very next morning, I got a call from my lawyer, David. Buddy, he said, barely containing his amusement, I just got off the phone with the HOA's legal team. They're panicking. They want to discuss a resolution. I laughed. Oh, I'll bet they do. What are they offering? A full retraction of all fines they sent you, an official apology, and a promise to review their community enforcement practices. I nearly choked on my coffee. That's cute, David chuckled. Yeah, I told them to shove it. We're still going after them for harassment, fraudulent fines, and enabling trespassing. Their little promise isn't gonna cut it. I was loving this, but the real cherry on top? The news crew I had contacted showed up that afternoon. The local reporter, a woman named Jessica Monroe, stood in front of my property with her cameraman, already thrilled by the drama. So, she said, microphone in hand, a local HOA president arrested for vandalizing solar panels? This is one of the wildest stories we've covered. Oh, trust me, I said, grinning. It gets better. I walked her through everything. The fake fines, the bogus complaints, the tow truck stunt, and, of course, the hilariously incriminating footage of Karen trying and failing to sabotage my solar panels. Jessica was eating it up. When the segment aired that evening, it was a masterpiece. Power struggle in Oak Ridge Estates. HOA president arrested for vandalism. They played the footage of Karen falling off my ladder twice. The clip went viral. By the next morning, people all over town were talking about it. The HOA was flooded with angry calls and emails. And then The HOA held an emergency meeting. Normally, HOA meetings were dull affairs, but not this one. By the time I arrived, the room was packed with furious homeowners, some of whom had been screwed over by Karen's ridiculous rules for years. At the front of the room, the remaining HOA board members looked like cornered animals. One resident, an older man who had been fined thousands of dollars for improper lawn maintenance, stood up and said, "Enough. We want her gone. We want all of you gone." A woman in the back shouted, "HOA recall vote." It spread like wildfire. By the time the vote was held, it was a landslide. Karen kicked out. The HOA board almost entirely replaced. The new president, a reasonable guy named Tom, who immediately started undoing Karen's legacy of nonsense. And as for me, I stood at the back of the room, watching it all unfold, sipping a cup of delicious solar-powered victory. After being removed from the HOA and publicly humiliated, Karen had one last move left. She sold her house and left town. One day, I saw a for sale sign go up in her yard. A few weeks later, a moving truck pulled in, and then she was gone. I never saw her again. With Karen out of the picture, the HOA actually became functional. No more insane fines for trash cans being out 5 minutes too long. No more power-hungry insanity. And me, I expanded my solar array, making my home even more energy efficient. I even helped a few neighbors install their own panels now that the anti-solar dictatorship was gone. One afternoon, I sat on my porch, sipping an iced coffee powered by Karen's worst nightmare, free, clean energy. Frank, my neighbor, strolled by. "You know," he said, "I gotta hand it to you. You didn't just beat Karen, you broke the whole system." I smirked, raising my glass. "Some people fight for justice. I just wanted cheaper electricity." Frank laughed. "Well, congrats. You got both." And as the sun shined down on my fully restored solar panels, I couldn't help but think, sometimes the best revenge is just living well.